As veterans, we struggle to fit in. Taught to never let feelings win. Lost in a world full of fear and pain. We all have hung our heads in shame. When we look up, we see hands reaching out. There is so much support about. It comes from above and others around. Please take a hand and rise from the ground. Stand up and fight for your life. Walk away from negativity. Don't give in to strife. Show up for yourself. Find your voice. Keep moving forward. You have a choice. Give compassion for the child inside. Healing pain, let hope reside. Lost you will no longer be. Then you can help set others free. Now speak up and with us share the tools that make pain easy to bear. Advocate for others to lighten their load. Here's your voice and join our show. On Coffee Talk with Bryan and Marie, we heal out loud, PTSD to advocacy.
Boom. Got my drumstick on that, you know. I love our intro. It's so fun. How are we doing, Marie?
I am doing better. So for those of you who've been following along, I got a hysterectomy and a prolapse repair and a couple weeks ago, and the surgery itself went really well. There's a lot of emotions involved with it, a lot of emotions as a woman losing, losing my uterus. There's a lot there. And then I had some complications, had an infection, and then reactions to medication. So it
Oh,
was a rough week, but I am doing better. Today's the first day I actually got up and got dressed. So I'm excited to be here. How are
well,
you doing?
you do look chipper though. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah,
For going through it. So
I feel
I'm glad.
better today. So
Good. I'm glad to see that you're back, and I know you were super nervous going into it, and you had a lot of mixed emotions about it as well. So I'm glad that to see that you're healing well, and you're back on the show, and we're back on to another great guest. I'm excited for our next guest. And before we get started, though, we're gonna do what we normally do. We're changing it up a little bit. This time we're gonna share another podcast before we get into it. This one is this guy right here is kind of what I think we all strive to be when it comes to being a podcast. And I gotta say, let me stop sharing this one. I gotta add this one real quick. This guy right here, he's been going for a long time, and he is almost at his 500th episode. And he is a Marine veteran. His podcast is Oscar Mike Radio. His name is Travis Partington, and what an awesome guy he is. And like I said, he is setting quite the example for a lot of us out there. Been going strong. He's almost 10 years and 500 interviews. It's just wild. And so he's a lot of podcasts, they start and they go. And then, the next thing you know, they're done within a year. Some of them don't even make it a year long. So the fact that he's going strong 10 years still and still pushing through, and just like I said, He is what we all strive to be. And I know, Marie, you've been on his show, right?
Yeah, I've been on a show. He
Same
is
here.
amazing. Their show is so great. He also a couple weeks ago we highlighted the Homefront Sit Rep podcast. And over here, Travis at Oscar Mike, he is highly involved with the same things that Willis is. And so he goes into that podcast for veteran podcasters, which is the tip of the spear. He goes in there and shares his experience and stuff like that. And then he also goes into the Cav Arts podcasting class for veterans, and he helps talk about what it's like to have a podcast and how to set it up. So if you're a veteran and you are interested in podcasting, this Travis here is a great resource for you, and just his podcast overall is a lot of fun to be a part of.
Absolutely. So go check out Oscar Mike Radio, a fellow devil dog, Travis Partington. We appreciate you, brother. Keep doing what you're doing out there and inspiring all of us fellow podcasters. All right, now we're going to go ahead and give the show the floor to Marie and let her read her poem, and then we'll get going. So let's get this ready.
All right. Hi, guys. Glad to be here. I have a new poem that I actually finished last night. So it was like 11 o'clock last night. So it's called The Devil's Game. Distraction is the devil's game, following behind blame and shame. Overcoming the other two, you start to see your worth anew. He finds a way to blind your eyes. No more peace in the holy prize of feeling joy for who you are. He uses his whole repertoire. He knows your worth more than you. He has a better point of view. Your noble birthright to defame, so you will not take your claim of standing with Christ next to God. His battlefield is super broad. Distraction to lead astray if he can't make you turn away. Substance, food, sex, or a job, electronics, attention to rob, away from the redeeming love of our Father high above. God's arms are open wide for all. Christ lifts us from the fall. Yet Satan keeps hands entertained. Instead of reaching out, we are restrained. Distraction's not the same as rest. We sometimes need breaks from the test. The problem when we stop listening, or if we keep on distancing from the path God guides us to, or start to isolate, loneliness may ensue. When we stop service or hide our talents, these are other ways we lose balance. Avoiding anxiety or depression, we lose our voice, no expression. Feelings must be addressed. We will not succeed if they are repressed. A tool Satan uses to distract is giving half truths so we don't react. To blatant lies we'd see isolated. This is how some are baited. They don't completely turn around, stepping off the path not safe and sound, which puts them in a vulnerable place where a mist of darkness can fill the space. Then the way back may be lost. No one knows what distraction can cost. Once it's clear you're in distraction, all it takes is a little action. Turn your eyes back towards God, who'll guide you forward with a nod. There's plenty of good works to do and plenty of good books, too. There's connection found everywhere to people or nature, light to share. Increasing our talents or sharing our story, using our voice to give God glory. There's so many ways to find peace, for love in our heart to increase. Feeling emotions doesn't need to be scary. Embracing them may seem contrary. If you are tempted to distract, remember you can choose to act. If you get lost in the devil's game, it's your life to reclaim. Find a way to stay present, even if it feels unpleasant. When you process through hard things, that is when true freedom rings. So, thanks for letting me read that poem. And I wanted to make a comment on here. I know that we have a lot of people with different beliefs. Okay? And I know a lot of my poetry reflects my personal beliefs in the Savior and in God. And I want you to know that please don't use that as a reason not to listen to us or listen to our podcast, because that's our my personal beliefs are mine, right? My Brian and I, our whole deal is just find whatever power works for you to help you find peace in the pain. Find a way that you aren't stuck in anger and resentment. Whatever that higher power is for you is awesome. Please don't use my personal beliefs as a reason to avoid the conversation, if that makes sense. But thank you
Uh,
guys for letting me have the freedom to
Absolutely. Let's get ready for our next guest. Before I do, I'm going to remove us and bring us back on so we're switched back up. And I know that kind of throws us off.
Okay.
Boom. All right, cool. All right, let's get
Okay.
ready for our next guest. I'm super excited to have our next guest, and it's always good to learn from a different perspective. So you guys are
Yes.
gonna get to
So
hear
so
this.
our next guest is Erin Schalk, and I met her at the Armed Services Art Partnership class. It was a poetry class. And she is married to an Air Force retiree. She's been married to him mostly his whole career. And she is just such a phenomenal writer. And she has so much passion and love that she explores in her writing and that she shares in when she speaks. And I was just I was so honored that she said that she'd come on our show. And so she is a writer, artist, and educator whose work lives at the intersection of language, visual storytelling, and community. Writer, editor, and interdisciplinary artist with an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Her work spans literary writing, visual art, and education with a focus on storytelling, accessibility, and human experience. Her writing has appeared in numerous literary journals, and her artwork has been exhibited internationally. She works with writers to strengthen voice, structure, and emotional depth in their work, and with over a decade of experience in education, she also develops programs and workshops that integrate art, writing, and inclusive practices. Come on and join us, Erin.
Welcome.
Hello, Marie. Hello, Brian. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Pleasure to have you on, and we're
So
excited to
excited.
get to know a lot about you.
So,
Yeah.
where would you like me to begin?
Tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up, kind of how you came to be who you are, and then we will travel into how you met your husband, a little bit about what your life as a spouse to a veteran or to a military member has been, and that transition as he's getting out, and all of the things that you are into now, all of your writing and all of this stuff. We'll interrupt you a whole ton. This is kind of your show, but let's just go along with your timeline.
Now I gotta imagine being in the Air Force, you guys moved around a lot, yeah? Or
Yes, I'll
so you
back.
definitely had to get used to that.
It's interesting. So my father was a Vietnam veteran, and I came
Awesome.
many years later.
Okay.
But he was in Vietnam in the last years of the war, and the way that things worked out for him. So he was an Iowa farm boy. He didn't have a college education. He drew a low draft number when he reached the age where he could be drafted. And a big game changer for him, and I bring this up because this will come into my life a little bit later, is that he took the language test for those entering the military and he scored very high. So he ended up, and it was just a natural affinity that he happened to have, a natural talent he happened to have. And so he ended up being stationed in Thailand as a linguist for 4 years. But this allowed him a fairly protected role compared to a lot of veterans of Vietnam. So growing up, I did know this about my dad. My dad did leave the military after the war ended for a number of different family reasons. And I knew about military life, but I knew it in a way that was very abstract. Vietnam had happened so long ago compared to when I was born.
Now,
And
did your dad, because we all know how Vietnam veterans were treated. I mean, do you feel that maybe he was very close to his military service due to that type of thing?
I believe so. It was something that just wasn't talked about. There were a couple of pictures of him in
Mhm.
uniform. I know more about his service actually from his sisters, from my aunts, than I know from him. They told me, for example, when he was going to be sent, over, when he was going through, I believe, the airport line, he slipped out around them and went past the gate so he didn't have to say goodbye to them because he knew that would be so painful. And I never learned that from him. I learned that from one of his sisters, one of my aunts. So I had a general understanding, and sometimes he would say a few words to us in Vietnamese from time to time, but I really didn't have a full understanding for a while until I met my husband. In terms of my childhood, so there is that military piece that will obviously come back as I go through different life stages. Another major piece is my particular health situation and how this relates to disability. So I was born as a child who was relatively sickly, and even from my earliest years, I had to be in the doctor quite often. I had some significant and even life-saving surgeries, which I'm very grateful for. Um, and I, unfortunately, from those basically bodily trauma that happens on a young child, this can be pretty fertile ground. And I think women have more of a predisposition to this to develop autoimmune related conditions.
Mm.
So I lived with a number of autoimmune diseases from basically about age 5 or 6 into my mid 20s. And I do bring this up because it was ultimately when we were in the military when this was eventually, thankfully, diagnosed. But I
Wow.
learned from a young age to that, chronic pain, for example, was a part of life, and that I had to, at the time, doing the best I could to push through and be resilient and persistent despite having to live with these chronic conditions. But they had no name, they had no diagnosis until my
Wow.
mid 20s. So art, of course, this segues to another component of my life, is art and writing were those places where I could process a lot of whatever happened to be happening in my life, whether it was my health, whether it was kind of fears about the next doctor's visit, something to take my mind off, the pain, the distress that I was experiencing. And when I was a child, interestingly enough, I had one of those desks, I believe maybe from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, circa World War II. I'm not exactly sure, but the kind where the lid can lift up and there's this big basin underneath where you can store all of your papers. And mine was just filled with papers, things that I was drawing, things that I was writing. I read voraciously. That was my window, I think, in a lot of ways, to the outside world, to arts and culture, to other types of experiences. And I grew up, my family was definitely, once my dad returned from the military, he stayed in the same areas in which he grew up. So living in very small Midwestern towns, in Iowa first, and then by the time I was in my early teens in Wisconsin. So I knew there was this world of arts and culture outside of the world that I knew, and I was so hungry for it. And I was taking in whatever I could, whether it was art shows on PBS, going to the local library. Every way I could educate myself is how I began. And by the time I was 12, because that hunger started very young, I had already published a very short article in a national
Wow.
magazine. And just learning, I guess, to put myself out there in ways that were definitely uncomfortable but I had grown fairly used to discomfort, in my physical body. So by the time I reached my later teens, unfortunately,
Before you
yes, go
before
ahead.
you move on, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So, as the child of a veteran who was in Vietnam, I just wanted to kind of ask, what were some of the struggles and strengths that you kind of saw in your father as a veteran? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And also, was the VA there to help you guys with any of this medical stuff? That was
Uh,
just a question that I had.
it's a great question. I think I'm thinking about my father's generation and how he was raised. And for him, moving on meant moving on. And he really left that world entirely. And I think, interestingly enough, as much as I wanted to get out of small town Midwest, he had grown up on a farm in Iowa, but he wanted to get out of that too. And so he did what seemed like, at the time, the right thing to do in the 80s and 90s was to get a white collar sort of corporate job.
Okay.
And it wasn't where his passions were. Actually, my father was a very naturally gifted athlete, in particular with golf, and he had a zero handicap for many years. And I think ultimately he did feel a calling to become, involved in that world more, but he didn't see it as something that could be stable enough, perhaps, for a family, for a wife and children. So that was something he set aside. But I know for him, the work that he did in corporate America during a time where um, it could be very difficult. I mean, it can be difficult for a lot of different reasons, but during that time where he was at, it was very long hours. I didn't see him much. I used to, he would come into my room at night when I was a child, and if he had any change in his pocket, he would put it on my dresser. And I would always try to kind of lie half awake with one eye open to catch him when he came in and listen for the jingle of the change. But a lot of the time, I would have fallen asleep by the time he got back because he was gone before we were up, and he was usually home after we had gone to bed. So, in certain ways, I feel like I don't know him as well as I should. And I know that's something he regrets too, how much of our childhood that he felt like he had to lose and truly was doing the best he could at the time, with the
And
situation.
I do imagine there's a part of him that kept busy, right?
Yeah.
To
Self-preservation.
Yeah,
kind of stay away from what he had, that's the best way he can move forward and not bring it back, right? It's just stay busy. And the poor dude was just working his ass off. I mean, that generation's just built different than most of us, but yeah, I mean, I gotta imagine that's gotta be hard. Now, you had just gone through pain your childhood, teen life, and you just thought that was normal, right? You're just thinking that this is kind of normalcy for you because this is what you've been dealing with your entire life. And then finally you get that, when you finally get that, like, the confirmation that there is something going on with you, I gotta imagine there's some kind of sense of like relief that you're like, wow,
Mhm.
wow. But then I mean, imagine you're probably like, goodness gracious, how much better could life been for me if they would have caught this a long time ago. Now, with your parents and stuff, was it more of like, oh, just, it's okay, honey, we always kind of just like pacified through your pain to kind of get through it? And then is that kind of why you found yourself drawing and stuff like that, because you were in so much pain, you kind of stayed home and were more of like a, like that was your way of getting away from your like pain and stuff like that for a moment?
definitely. I think, for my parents' particular generation, so they were, both my grandpas were in World War II, for example. All of my grandparents lived through the Great Depression. they had my parents inherited this too, a very pragmatic approach to life. And part of that was, if there's an ailment that doesn't really manifest in a very visible way, it's psychosomatic. And that's what I heard a lot as a child. And I do tend to, personality-wise, be a little more on the anxious side. So the doctors weren't finding what was going on. And after a certain point, there's kind of, okay, what can we do, from the doctors, from my parents? And you're absolutely right. I got to the point where this is my baseline. This is what life is like. And I learned how to cope with it in the best ways that I could. But I was having a number of different issues that were arising, and they were getting more complicated as I was getting older. And I hit a collapse point in my late teens that no one could really explain. If it works for you both, I actually have a poem that encapsulates a little bit of this health journey, this healing journey that I've been on, and I
Yes.
can share it with you.
Absolutely.
Jeez. Her writing, oh my gosh, dude, when we were in class and I was listening to her writing, like she is literally her heart out here and you're watching it beat. So I love her writing and the way that she shares. So I'm super excited for you guys to hear one of her poems.
Thank you. I'll provide a little bit of context on this one. For 6 years, I taught and supported adults with vision loss. And one of the ways I would do this is I would teach creative writing programs as well as visual arts programs. And as part of a world poetry course that I created for these students, we learned about writing praise poems. And praise poems are a tradition in many areas and cultures throughout Africa. And praise poems, in this case, I created an example one, and I used my body, my health situation as the focal point for this. And then I mentioned that it was originally published in the Pensive Immersive Literary Art. So I have to give credit where it was originally published. And to my surprise, it was actually nominated for one of the best of the net poems in 2024.
Awesome.
So it's,
When did you write this one?
I wrote it in, I think, 2022 or 3, and then it took about a year cycle for those nominations to happen.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Praise the lifetime surgery scar, the hidden mark of a child survivor. Praise the teenage hair loss, teaching beauty can be grown within. Praise the damaged intestines, the adulthood discovery demanding food as intentional medicine. Praise the always anxiety-soaked brain, hyper-conscious of every possibility. Praise the body and mind that still weather, adapt, and strive to heal themselves. Praise my voice, which paints word images for those who cannot see. Praise my eyes that have always known colors, that perceive sunrise from dusk. Praise my hands that lift up my young children and try to set down worries. Praise this body that remains in motion, that bends, stretches, spins, and runs. Praise this body that still is.
Erin.
Oh.
Love that. I think I froze. Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I really love that, Erin, because that's the journey that I'm on right now. You know, I don't know if I had told you, but I got diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Oh, we're back. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a echo situation. But yeah, so I was diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and they are in the process of seeing if I have an autoimmune disorder as well. And with everything that I've had going on with all of my recent surgeries, you know, had to get my hips replaced and a couple other surgeries, just had this hysterectomy. I am trying trying to love my body for where it's at and for the strength that it has. And so I appreciate that poem because that is like speaking to my heart because that's what I've been trying to do is like praising my body for where it still is and for the strength that it has. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and you got to definitely have some grace upon yourselves. You know what I mean? This is definitely not something that anybody wished for yourself, right? I mean, but I do find it amazing that you find a way to kind of express yourself and put it down because there's so many people probably feeling just like you, but to put it on, put it out because a lot of times everybody's different kind of learners, but sometimes putting that out that way, it really resonates with people and they can start to look at things a little bit differently. I do imagine that this has created a lot of PTSD for you, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time that you don't need to go to war to have PTSD. There's a lot of people that go through a lot of medical trauma that can create it as well. I know, for you, especially, going through pain and stuff like that. And I imagine it's enabled you in so many ways. Like, I don't know if you ever were like trying to go out and play or do sports or anything. And then like, you're just in too much pain and you can't do it. I imagine that's definitely played a big factor in your entire life.
Absolutely. And there were definitely seasons where it would spike more severely. And like you mentioned, there were times where I was involved in activities and I just had to remove myself because physically I couldn't do it. And I think that's why I ultimately ended up being someone who tends to read a lot, write a lot, create art a lot. That's something that you can do in a more contained space with less physical exertion. So, for example, both my father and my mother are, very gifted athletically, and I was completely different from anything they would have imagined in that regard. In terms of PTSD, definitely. I mean, I can, say with full sincerity that my very first memory that I can recall was when I was about 4 years old and I was being taken to the hospital for surgery, for multiple surgeries. And I can, remember the person I was sharing a room with and how she, at the moment, had vomited as soon as I showed up, not because of me, but because of her condition. And, the different rooms they would wheel me to. And even when it was time for the surgery and they gave me the choice, do you want to be wheeled into the operating room in a wheelchair, or do you want your parents to take you? And, I asked for my parents, and my dad carried me in and he put me on the table. And I still remember the fear in his eyes. So, yeah, and, it's interesting. And it took me, honestly, until my late 20s to even realize that that's what it was, PTSD. And I mean, I had read the diagnostic criteria, and it would always say back then, at least, that I had to have gone through war, combat, some kind of massive assault. And in those days, it always felt like a big disqualifier. And it was one of those things where it was never really, in my particular case, witnessed. And it's interesting because when I did go on to do my MFA years later, that was what I created my thesis exhibition about and wrote you also write a long written thesis, in the program that I was in. That's what I wrote it about how critical it is for, anyone who's undergone any sort of trauma, whether it's related to health concerns, war, generational traumas, inherited traumas, all these different things, that critical piece of witnessing those. And that's ultimately what I did through an art installation that I created and through the written thesis and the poetry that accompanied that. But I do think what makes it so difficult, I have a dear friend and a colleague, and she's well she's had a very long career in psychology and education, a 43 plus year career, and she's now, into retirement. And she talked about PTSD as something, because it's something she's encountered, is, it imprints on you. It marks you in a certain way. And there are definitely paths to healing. For me, a lot of that has been through artistic and creative expression. But
I
it's that line through your life, that before and that after, and that line is fairly indelible. And kind of coming to terms with, I think for me, when I began to start healing psychologically more so, was when I realized that break, that rupture occurred, and things are never going to be quite the same again. So trying to manufacture that in some way, I'm not going to spend my energies there. And that was very liberating for me, but it took me a long time to get there. And I'm sorry, Marie, I kept going, but I think you had something you wanted to interject.
No, it's okay. I have this tendency to interject, and so I stop myself. I'm working on stopping myself so I can listen and then say something. So, but the question that I have for you is, you're talking about witnessing trauma, right? And I think this is an important topic to highlight. And I want to hear what you would say to our listeners, because my thought process is going like this. Okay. We talk about witnessing trauma. We witness our own trauma. Okay. But sometimes we get in our head that if it's not witnessed by other people, it is not trauma. It is not
Mhm.
validated. And so, what would you say to people who are struggling with the idea, I have this trauma. I think it's trauma. It's something that I've witnessed in myself and something that I've experienced, but other people are telling me it's not trauma.
Mhm.
What would you say to these people?
That's a great question. It's a difficult question, and I might have a few different answers and approaches to it. This particular question, Marie, actually, I'll bring up a project first, and then I'll kind of work my way back to answering your question in greater detail. But this particular question, I recently finished a full length novel manuscript, and the premise of this novel is that there's this young girl, she's 13, and in her school, in her class, violence occurs, a school shooting occurs, and on the day it happens, she happens to be away. She's at an academic tournament. She's competing in this tournament. She comes back to the aftermath, and she feels incredible survivor's guilt for not being there with her fellow students, her peers who are suffering. And she begins to develop symptoms of PTSD. She's only 13. She doesn't have the language for it for many, many years. And she also personally feels like she has no right to feel this, because she was the lucky one who was gone that day. And the book actually follows, um, in terms of, say, like school shootings, school traumas, there's this whole range of the immediate aftermath, the midterm aftermath, the long-term aftermath. And this book follows her trajectory for about 15 years. And we see all of that play out in her story and the story of her friends and her community. It's not easy, because I think, we're humans and we're wired for community. And in some cultures, there's a lot more done collectively as a community to try to help those who have been through trauma heal, that it's looked upon as more of a community responsibility. And in some people's situations, that's not the case, and they carry those quiet burdens alone. I would say, and I think sometimes too, depending on the nature of that trauma, it may be a long time before a person individually is able and willing to witness that, especially if it's been invalidated by many people in their near environment. I would hope that person could find access to some kind of supportive resource, whether that was a therapist, support group, some kind of community for survivors in similar situations as that person. But that, I think, is one part of the piece. And I think another part of that piece is going through that journey individually as well. And I wish I had an easy answer for that, because I feel like the timeline for everyone is different. And I feel like the way in which everyone processes it is different too. I'm fortunate that I can lean on writing, creative arts as a means of doing that. I know not everyone has a voice in that way. I do know there are organizations that help in that particular regard, whether it's like psychological therapy based or arts therapy based. I know for many people too, and this has been the case for my life as well, prayer is very important, faith is very important too. I think, the work that you're both doing, bringing these issues to light to reduce that stigma that has been held upon, a lot of people who have undergone these things. And it's not as simple as just moving forward, mind over matter. You're shining light in those dark places, and hopefully there will be more people who find, the work that you're doing in related podcasts and organizations, and are able to start finding the support that they need. But it is a very, very difficult issue. And I think the more conversations like these where we're having, it reduces, that feeling of shame, I'm hoping, for many people, where this person has had an experience very similar to mine. They're speaking about it openly. There's not shame in this, and there are avenues for healing.
No, and that's that's exactly great. Great what you just said. I mean, the show that's exactly what we're trying to do, and we want to remove the stigma, because there's a lot of young folks out there that we don't want them to go through like the 20 years or so many years of just trying to figure it out, right? Like sometimes that's the hard part is we're trying to figure it out, and because we've always been told to suppress our feelings, take a straw, suck it up, whatever. And now I think that we're finding that that's been very unhealthy, right? Like, and we're finding out that a lot of us are carrying a lot of damage with us that we could have offloaded earlier had we dealt with it in a better manner. So talking about it is important. And the more that we can get people out there to talk about their experiences, especially something like you, Erin. I mean, how many other kids during during your time of life went through what you went through, and earlier, right? And especially, because each of these generations all have been taught to kind of be very tough, suck it up, and just work through it, and but then through the whole time you're kind of damaging yourself the whole time, even more and more, sometimes taking very small chips out of yourself until at one point in time you feel the very much of the weight and the burden of all of that all the damage you've taken. So I appreciate people like you, Marie, and everybody that comes out and has a voice and wants to talk and wants to voice what they've been through and experienced, because it's important for each and every one of us to talk about it, because there's someone out there that can learn from this, a young one of us, and they're like sitting there like, gosh, trying to figure it all out. And so I do appreciate people like you. I think this is probably a good opportunity. What we'll do is do a veteran showcase real quick. Then we'll come back. Erin will kind of talk about more on the flip side. Now, you grew up with a veteran, and then you end up marrying a veteran. So we'll kind of get to hear about that and how that was. And you stayed with him for, through this whole, you guys been married through the whole duration, basically, of his service. So we'll go ahead and get on with this next veteran showcase. We're going to be showing, this is going to be for Army veteran. He's in the Special Forces, amazing singer-songwriter. Just an awesome dude. And he's out there really just putting his work in there. He did 20 years too, 20 years in the special forces. So it's quite awesome. And so, he's got a little bit of a late start into his music career, but nevertheless, it's awesome. So we're going to go ahead and give him his showcase. We'll be right back. Let's see here.
What's his name, Bryan?
His name is Derek Stoner. My bad. I didn't say that. But
Okay.
yes, Derek Stoner. And we'll talk a little bit more about him after we play his music. But here we go.
There's a folded note on my front door. It says, I'm sorry, babe, I can't take no more. Years ago today, we said our vows and started on our way. First the babies came and then the war. But when I came home, it wasn't home anymore. She tried like hell with all her might. It broke her heart when I lost the fight. As I sat and drank the pain away, only she could know the price I'd pay. So here's to the years that are history, to the love we share, the highs and the lows. I'll raise this glass to her memory and try to drink this house back into a home. Ten years have passed since she moved on. The kids are raised and now on their own. I watched them grow through photographs. Those days are gone, this bottle's all I have. So here's to the years that are history, to the love we share, the highs and the lows. I'll raise this glass to their memory and try to drink this house back into a home. Here's to the years that are history, to the love we share, the highs and the lows. Well, I'll raise this glass to their memory and try to drink this house back into a home. There's a folded note on my front door. I'm sorry, babe, I can't take no more.
All right. That right there was Derek Stoner. And remember, it's free 99 to go check out his stuff. You guys go over at his YouTube channel, go give him a subscribe, go check him out on Spotify, Apple Music, all that good stuff. And just go show him a little bit of love. He's got a lot of music out there. I know I played one that's a little bit probably slower for him, but he has a really good library of music. But we're all right. Let me get this stuff off. And so, all right, Erin, let's go ahead and get you back on and talk more about. Now, you ended up marrying an Air Force, a guy who was in the Air Force. What at the time is he enlisted? Officer? Give us a little bit of a rundown of your guys's, how you met, and then how you fared as a spouse, and then how you mitigated through, all the stuff you found medically and things of that nature.
But feel free to also integrate a little bit of your high school experience into it, because I know you're talking about young adulthood, young teenage years. Feel free to kind of like talk a little bit about high school transitioning into that adulthood.
Sure, sure. So my husband and I are 4 years apart in age, and we were living in a similar area at that point. We were both living in the Madison area in Wisconsin, but I was always young enough that, when I was a freshman in high school, he was a freshman in college. So we didn't actually meet each other when I was a teenager, but I made it through high school. But as I was getting to be 18 years old is when my body really started to go through basically a collapse. It just didn't have the reserves to pull from anymore. And I spent 2 years, ages 18 to 20, really just working primarily on my recovery. That was difficult for me because I'm someone who really likes to be moving forward, and I had wanted to get out, either the West Coast or the East Coast, places where writing and art have these strong communities. And that wasn't going to be in the cards during that time. So when I was 20 is when I met my husband, and he had just joined the military about 6 months prior. For him, he was trying to figure out what to do after college with his life, and he felt a very strong calling to join the military. And in college, he had studied photography, map making, and he just didn't really, see necessarily a path forward with that he wanted to take at that point. But he did feel that strong calling to join the military. So it took him some time. I think it took a year or two for him before he was able to actually start out. And because he had finished college, he did start as an officer in the Air Force, but he had to go through a lot of hurdles, I think different types of medical releases as well. So he's finally in the Air Force in around May of 2004, and the two of us met in December, right around Christmas time of 2004. The story of our meeting, this is a little bit embarrassing, but this is how it worked out. So my father at that point had his own business, and he was in finance at that point. But it was rocky. So even though, it can sound like finance is something where there's a lot of money to be gained, in that particular situation, that particular economy, it wasn't. It was a business that was struggling to survive. And my father liked to put a recent picture of myself and a recent picture of my brother. I have one sibling on his desk. And it was my husband's mother, now my mother-in-law, and she had come to visit my dad to be one of his clients. And the two of them basically played matchmaker in a way, and they they had. So my husband, his name is Byron. His mom brought in a picture of him recently, in his Air Force dress uniform with the American flag behind him. And my dad brought in a picture of me, and they exchanged the pictures. And so I got Byron's picture.
That's awesome.
He got mine. It sounds like something out of, a century ago. It really does.
They just make a movie out of this one. Sheesh.
And he at the time was already stationed in Florida, so he was far away. And I had started my first semester of college kind of late because of my health situation, and I was home on Christmas break, and he came back and he emailed me and he said, "Do you want to get together?" And basically we spent that whole week of Christmas break pretty much inseparable. Even though he hadn't seen his family in about 6 to 8 months, sorry family, he was spending all that time with me. And then we spent about a year and a half doing a long distance relationship. He was sent back to
You don't have to say sorry. Your parents set that up. They put you guys on it.
You sound it sounds like old school courting.
It does.
Like, really, may I call on you, my dear? That's what it sounds like. Completely old school courting. That's awesome.
Sounds like a Lifetime movie.
But we held up that long distance relationship, and we were texting, emailing, instant messaging, keeping in contact the whole time. And then whenever we could go out and visit each other, we would. And then we were married in January of 2006. So we've been married officially 20 years since January. So by January 2006, suddenly, we're together. We were stationed at Tinker Air Force Base. We have our first duty station as a married couple. We're really young, still very young. And this is where that gap from our abstract understanding of military life, because my husband's father was also in the military. He was a Vietnam vet as well, but like my dad, for a very short amount of time, and he had a fairly protective non-combat role. So my husband's father was, my father-in-law was an instructor. So, and again, didn't really talk about the experience much. So within our first 4 years of marriage, I should say, my husband was deployed 3 times to the Middle East. There were many TDYs. In my case, I was hundreds of miles away from family each time, and I didn't really have a support network yet. And like I mentioned to you both, I had a lot of health-related issues that were happening, and they began to hit, higher levels as I would get older. So it was definitely, we got dropped into it very quickly, and the challenges that it involves. And yes, definitely moving around a lot. And even as a child, I should have mentioned earlier, Bryan, I did move around quite a lot with my dad's job. So it did give me some background into how to manage, major transitions and starting over with a
You were built for it then.
Eventually, I think the machinery kind of gave out a few years ago, but it gave me a skill set, that not everyone would have had. But navigating the health-related concerns is complicated as a spouse, as someone in the military.
And I gotta imagine it's even worse when you're moving a lot, right? Because here you are getting comfortable, explaining everything to these set of doctors. Now you got to go all over again. It's like, and it's almost like a reset, right? You're like, gosh, dang, I know you guys got my file and stuff, but they want to themselves go through it all over again. So I imagine that part was kind of rough as well.
Definitely. And I think too, there's kind of an added complication when you're a spouse that, there is sort of a contract that you enter into in a way that, we didn't realize, because this was for anyone
That
who's younger.
unspoken contract.
That, a lot was on my shoulders in the background to make things work. And I'll share, for example, when we had our first overseas duty station and we were sent to Okinawa, Japan, my symptoms went through the roof. I mean,
Ooh.
I would wake up in the morning, it would feel like there was a knife in my belly. Like the pain was that intense. And
Can I
yeah,
ask if you're comfortable sharing what diagnoses do you have?
I have a number of different diagnoses. At first, they thought it was lupus, and I was never officially diagnosed as such, but I appeared to be borderline for a while in that regard. I did have very advanced celiac disease, is what they found. And the thing about celiac disease is when it's gone on for, in my case, it had gone on for about 20 years undiagnosed at that point. My intestines were just shot. And then what happens is it affects all kinds of other areas of the body. So I had the celiac rash, which is called dermatitis herpetiformis, all over my body. It is the most painful rash in existence, and I lived with that for 15 years. When I was 18 years old, about 3/4 of my hair fell out, and it never fully all came back. I used to get neuropathy in my fingertips and in my legs, like my whole parts of my body would go numb from it. So everybody's situation is different, but mine had progressed to such a serious point. And when they did find it eventually, but backtracking a little bit, is that there was pressure early on because it hadn't been diagnosed, and because health conditions among family members can affect an active duty career, there was pressure early on, unfortunately, from fellow spouses and even from one particular doctor to keep it hidden. And there
Get
was,
over it. Move forward. Drink water. Drive on. You're the spouse. Hold it together. Yeah.
Here's Motrin.
I was told by one doctor, "You're not going to die from this." So, that being said, another doctor did.
Which is a lie, because you can.
Yes.
From the complications.
Yeah, the complications are terrible. I mean, 50% more likely to get digestive
Infections and stuff, I imagine too, right?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, other autoimmune conditions. I mean, when they found that the lupus was borderline, it's like, we got to get this under control, because the longer this goes out of control, the more autoimmune diseases you can start to pick up.
Oh gosh.
So,
I'm really glad that you brought up that whole spousal pressure, because we talk a lot about in the military community how we sometimes place undue pressure on each other, right? If it doesn't look like this, you're wrong. This is how you should act. Da 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 da. Da. But there's a lot of that happens with the spouses. And there is a lot that happens there. I have seen a lot of shaming happen with people who don't fit the mold. If you aren't supportive the way that they want you to be supportive, then they kind of kick you out. And so thank you for bringing that up. You're our first spouse to come on here. And so it's good to see. I mean, there's a lot of positives with being a spouse and having some support systems, right? But others, it's just as bad. It's like a clique. It's like a sorority is what I've seen.
yeah, I thank you for sharing that, Marie. I was a little nervous to bring up that part. I wasn't sure if that would be appropriate or not. And
We talk about the dirty
everything
and
is
the clean.
appropriate
We talk
here.
about everything. Yeah. We
Yeah,
bring it all to light, so it's not a stigma anymore. Like we
Yeah.
want to break the stigmas. We want to break these patterns of behavior that are causing people to go inwards and kill themselves. You've got spouses, you've got veterans, you've got the first responders, all of these people who are in these high pressure environments. And again, I put spouses in there because you guys are part of the high pressure environment. We've got all these people. We talk so much about the suicide pandemic in the military and first responders, but spouses are doing it too because of this high pressure stuff. that is going on.
Definitely no shame in it, Erin, at all.
Yeah.
It's, it is important to share the struggles that, as a spouse, especially when it comes to dealing with medical world and stuff like that, because I do imagine, being married to him, you are on, his medical and all that stuff. So you're going in and seeing those medical doctors. And we all know that these doctors are a little bit different than the other doctors. A lot of them are Motrin and, hydrate and keep your socks dry. But, with what you were going through, I imagine, and this is the hard part, right? A lot of people always expect to see something wrong with someone, right? Like that's the hard part when you have these kind of autoimmune diseases and stuff to that nature. People can't see those kind of things. People just assume that because you're up and around, and I imagine you've been doing this for many, many years of kind of doing the up and around and just making it work, that, that was probably a little bit of a struggle as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I learned to mask, I learned to compensate, and I learned to keep it all internal, so much so I didn't realize how much I was doing that. And to your earlier point, Marie, I definitely did more or less become one of those spouses that didn't fit the mold and tended to exist on the fringes of, the social circles. What did happen that was incredible for us as a couple, and we did wait a number of years to have children until my body was a lot more, I'm trying to think of the best word, but more stabilized.
Cohesive.
Yeah.
A cohesive environment to bear children.
Right. Instead of, one that was basically destroyed inside, it needed years for regrowth and healing. I did not fit the mold at all, but what this gave me freedom to do, especially in Japan and being a foreigner in Japan, is to start carving out my own path in different ways. And I'm very grateful because my husband has always been very supportive in that regard. There was never any pressure for me to try to navigate, say, like the different political landscapes of being a spouse. He wanted me to be healthy and well and to also be myself. And, that having that kind of relationship is certainly what has kept us, together for over 20 years now through a lot of challenges and a lot of, say, uncertainty with the things that this particular life demands. But, gratefully, there was a young doctor in Okinawa on base who was a lot more well-versed in these types of autoimmune conditions. And he put me through a lot of tests until we could pinpoint everything and until the treatment could, really start to take effect. And once I began to feel so much better, I mean, night and day doesn't even begin to fully describe it. And I realized I was more or less on the fringes. I couldn't, fit within, say, like the social circle very well. And a lot of spouses, in Okinawa at that time were having children, and we knew this wasn't the right time. I had to take time for my body to heal. I got involved a lot with the local communities, and this is where aspects of my father and his talents for language came into play. And I found out that I had a talent for learning languages, and I started to learn Japanese in earnest. Reading, writing, speaking, listening comprehension. I will say this was a number of years ago. I'm very rusty now, but I do hope to pick it up again one day. But I got involved in showcasing my art at the Okinawa Prefectural Museum of Art. Oki 10 was a major exhibition. I think it's still going. It's held every year in Okinawa since the end of World War II. I had my work in Oki 10 multiple times. I was teaching English as a foreign language to Japanese students, and we were all speaking in Japanese and English back and forth with each other, tutoring students in art and writing. And it was the first time in my life where I had the the physical wellness, I was doing a lot better, and where I had kind of the social freedom in a way to just start getting involved in these pieces that continue to shape my life and work today. Advocacy, teaching, writing, visual arts. So everything has, its silver linings as well. But I can say this now with over a decade in hindsight, that all of these different experiences gave me tools that have served me in a number of ways, which I am not grateful necessarily for the difficulty of those experiences, but for the tools that they've given me.
Outstanding. So I'm going to go ahead and share your website.
Yeah, I was just
And
thinking, I know, I don't
show
know
some
if
of
any of
your.
this, I don't know if any of this is your older stuff from what you were saying when you were in Japan, but I thought it would be fun to kind of show a little bit of your visual work as well. You already shared one of your poems. So is there anything on here and specifically that you would like us to highlight?
Oh, that's a good question. So everything on this version of the website, and I just updated it a couple of weeks ago, everything from this version of the website is more recent than the artwork from Japan, and I'm going to have to create an archive at some point. I think the two areas that might be most beneficial for your viewers might be the ekphrasis one, the first one under that banner, as well as the last one, the public art and installation. So this work is from 2022 and 2023, respectively. And I had a solo exhibition. At the time we were living in Southern California, so I had a solo exhibition happening at a college in Southern California. And I also showcased some of this work at the John Wayne International Airport in Santa Ana, Orange County, California. And this was a departure for me because I've always been a painter primarily. But I wanted to take, say, stories of individuals with different types of disabilities, chronic illness. So my case with autoimmune conditions, I was working with students who had either complete vision loss or partial vision loss, and also working with individuals on the autism spectrum. And I wanted to create these photographic artworks that showcase the person, the portrait of that person, but then also showcase, or I should say kind of illustrate in different ways in which these people manage their disabilities, their challenges in life. Like, for example, with some of the students I was working with who had vision loss, I would create the image in a way to where we're seeing like how that student would see. So in the bottom row, the second image from the left, that particular student, when she would look at the world, that's what she would see. She would see these spider webs in front of her eyes continually, except for one clear inch spot, I believe, by either her left or her right eye. The image next to that one is a portrait of a woman with vision loss related to albinism. And for her, what happens are blowouts of, say, like everything is so bright, like the sun magnified 100 times. For the child in the bottom right-hand corner, he has autism spectrum disorder. And so with that, I have a visual representation of what sensory overload can feel like. And we have those, say, kind of branch-like shapes, those neural pathway sort of shapes. And I think, and I put more of my pictures that in this gallery than were actually in the exhibition. It was more evenly distributed across all the participants, but a body not at peace. That was essentially the crux of the images of mine. And you see these fragmented versions of a body that are almost fighting themselves at different points. So I really wanted to shed light on these experiences in a way that really showcase the individual, moving past stereotypes, past preconceptions. And each of these artworks also had a corresponding poem that would shed even more light. So ekphrastic is a tradition of combining visual images and poetry, where they work together. So I think it was a kind of a confluence of everything, if that makes sense, that the disability awareness and advocacy, the teaching, the visual arts piece, and the writing piece is all coming together in this particular body of work.
So did this I'm thinking, okay, you said that you started doing this art and getting into the community and kind of getting into that radical acceptance of yourself and your stuff while you are in this early marriage and this, that, and the other. Did you do a project like this kind of with regards to your own stuff? I know that this kind of represents part of yourself as well with not feeling at peace in your body and giving other people a voice. Did you do something similar for yourself around that time as well?
So there's
Or now, I guess. Yeah.
I have ideas. They're in the early stages, but a few years back, I did do. If you go to the gallery, that's called What We Built, and that's the second one. So it's hard to encapsulate this in a few sentences, but I'll do my best. So this was a big part of that thesis that I described earlier, the traumatic and empathic witness. And what it involved is you would enter this small room, this small private room, and it was basically a 2-channel video projection. You can kind of see that in the pictures there, that there were 2 different videos, or actually 3 different videos, but two projections playing at the same time. And it's been a while since I've done this piece, so I'll try to explain it in the best ways I can. It encompasses that time in Japan of being essentially an expatriate, being in a completely new and incredible culture, and I had that piece as well as my health piece happen at the same time, and my life was so dramatically changed during that time we were living there. So there's across the bottom, there are those portraits of me. Those are actually video stills. They're not photographs. And I'm writing on a window in this oil-based crayon. And I'm writing in English and I'm writing in Japanese, and I'm amassing all of this text. And I'm, thinking back to, say, like my dad's experience in the military and how it was language that ultimately saved us. And it gets thicker and it gets more dense. And I even use my hand to kind of smear a little bit of it across the window. And suddenly my face becomes very ghostly. It's very, say, kind of masked over. And I had a similar piece. If you look at the image in the upper left-hand corner, there's an image of the back of my head, and there are these really gestural, kind of anxious drawings, representing, say, that PTSD, like those things that I can't verbalize, that I can only communicate through these gestures, through these marks, because I don't have the language to get this out. So we have kind of all of these things happening, and what we see happening through the videos as you're watching is this process of erasure of a person. My face becomes less legible in terms of what you're able to see visually. And when I did part of this thesis, I activated it in the sense that as these videos were playing and you were seeing this process of erasure happening in these more visual ways, I was reciting this poetry that talked about, my grandfathers in World War II, talked about my father in Vietnam, talked about the experiences my husband and I have had in terms of military life and, our time in Okinawa. And it was touching on all those things. It was touching on the illness, the generational traumas, the war, how history can be very macro in the events that happen to people, how it can be very micro in the I should say very macro in the events that happen across the world and very micro in the events that happen to individuals and what that does. And even in that, some of the imagery and some of the poetry I was reciting did touch a little bit on that feeling of being silenced at times, say like with my illness, or sometimes feeling silenced as a military spouse. And again, that was one piece of a larger picture, but hopefully that gives you, again, I did that piece a number of years ago, so I'm a little bit rusty, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what that piece was about and answers your question, Marie.
No, it really does. Thank you. And it's beautiful to kind of see the the passion that you have in telling your story, and telling other people's story. I think that it is fantastic, like just the passion that you put into your projects and how they span so many years and so many different complex emotions. And I love that because there's so many people that would take half, quarter, an eighth of what you've been through and use that as an excuse to hate life and to hold on to resentment and to give up and to be frustrated and just to feel alone. And the beautiful resiliency that I see in your story is that ability to own what you are going through and own your life. This is your life, and you get to choose how you show up for it. And I think that is beautiful. Um, as we are, continuing on, how did all of this kind of affect getting you to where you're at today? Like what was that transition from that Okinawa and then that choice to start having children when your body was ready and lead you up into where you're at today?
And was there any kind of concerns too going into it with having kids? Like, oh gosh, what if my kids end up having this, and going through it as well, like where was your mindset when you were ready? Because I imagine that all played a little bit of a factor.
Hmm, definitely. So after our time in Okinawa, my husband had been in the military active duty wise for about a decade, and for a lot of reasons, not only related to my health situation, but I think a lot of reasons in terms of who we are as people, we decided to transition out of active duty life. And when my husband went into the reserves, because we knew that having, say, more location stability was going to be really beneficial for our particular family situation. So we spent a few years adjusting to that, that change, and adjusting. At the time we were in Texas. So we moved to Texas, but we didn't stay there. We moved to California. We moved to a lot of different places. But and so we did, interestingly, I was working on my MFA, and it was actually through a low residency program that was brand new at the time. I was part of the second class, whoever went through that full program, and it was beneficial because we didn't have to live in Chicago for me to complete that program. I would do a residency there every summer. But partway through that program is when we decided to start having children. And yes, absolutely, I was very afraid that our children would start to, have some of the conditions that I've had. And I know our daughter, our middle child, she does have the genetic predisposition for some of what I have. She doesn't have it yet, but if, say, something really traumatic were to happen to her body, that could activate that, like it did for me when I was a child. And so I tried to do, and I think this is something many parents can relate to. I tried to do everything right, everything by the book, absolutely, to illustrate to what extremes I was willing to go to protect my children from experiencing what I did. There was research at the time that if, a child was, say, nursed, breastfed for X amount of time, that greatly reduced the risk of developing autoimmune diseases. And I had my first child during graduate school, and I had to do my residency, and I was expressing milk every 3 hours around the clock that whole time. So like through the night, I was existing on very little sleep. I was freezing it all, and I was shipping it via FedEx, like one day air to get it to him. I was going to do everything I possibly could for him. That being said, life doesn't work that way, and we can't control anything. And actually, my oldest has special needs, which came about. We learned about in March of 2020 when he was officially diagnosed. So, we do everything that we can as parents, and it's taught me a lot about there are choices I can actively make, but not everything is in my hands. And I can, and this goes for any person, any parent, we can do everything right by the book, so to speak, but there are higher powers and higher factors at play, and there's reasons why, all these things have happened or are happening. And it takes creativity on our part to recognize the beauty and the gifts and the strengths that come, from life not going in perhaps the direction you thought it was going to go. So we love our children very much. We're very grateful for them, and we will, continue to do everything we can to protect them, to support them, to help them grow, to provide, the needs that they have. And it's a journey. We're a little very tight-knit family of 5, and we're fighting for each other always. So
love that.
So now that he is he officially retired now, or is getting ready to?
He officially retired in August of last year.
Okay, so now that he's retired, you have your little family, what are some of the things that you are involved with today? You've kind of touched base a little bit, but what are some of the things that you are involved with?
So we moved to a new location, to the St. Louis area, after spending about 7 years in Southern California. And we've been here about a year. So I'm definitely still getting things established. But what I am focusing on in more earnest now compared to in the past is spending more time on my creative practice. So under other circumstances, I would not have had the time or the space to complete this novel project that I recently finished. And it's been workshopped in a number of areas. I was fortunate to receive an ASAP scholarship to work on it, to further it and refine it. And now there is some agent interest in it. So fingers crossed, perhaps in the not too distant future, that will be something that will be published and available.
Let's highlight that program real quick.
Yeah.
Again, ASAP is the Armed Services Art Partnership, and they do all sorts of creative classes in person or online for veterans and family members. And they are fantastic. They're the ones that have done my podcasting classes that led me to meeting Bryan. They are the ones that did I've done a spoken word class where we had Mike Sears on here, who taught that class, who came and came on the
Nope.
which was amazing. And they've done multiple poetry classes that I've been a part of. They are just fantastic. So that is wonderful that you are getting that scholarship, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very appreciative. It's been very helpful to continue, moving forward with learning and creative projects. And basically right now I'm operating on a freelance basis, and I haven't really done this since I lived in Japan many years ago. But teaching on a freelance basis, I'll teach everything from, say, workshops to professional development trainings for educators, to professional development trainings about how to improve disability accessibility in different types of organizations. I'm doing a lot of contributing writing as well, writing for different magazines and publications. A lot of that focuses in on arts and culture, as well as disability awareness and accessibility. And I'll have some articles coming out in particular for Autism Awareness Month in April, as well as greater accessibility in education and online learning through Canvas in structure. So, one of those forces in edutech, allowing people of all different kinds of backgrounds and locations to be able to continue learning online. So things are still in progress. I'm in the process of building a number of things. And one other project I'll mention too, and this has also been something that has come out of ASAP as well, and having the opportunity to take acting classes, is I started work as an audiobook narrator, and I'm working on a series of books about autism in particular. I recently finished recording Against All Odds, Our Life Journey with Autism, which is a nonfiction book about how autism often manifests across the lifespan. And I'll be doing another couple of books along those similar topics. So work in progress, life in transition, but sometimes that's where some of the most interesting and unexpected things come from.
Awesome. This has been like super wonderful getting to know you. As we are coming to a close, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what are your socials? Bryan will put your website on there again. And would you care to finish us off with another poem?
Sure. Okay. I'm not extremely active on social media. I'm trying to get better about that. But you can find me on Instagram at Erin.Schalk. So just my name, but a dot in between the Erin and the Schalk. And I think too, if you visit my website, you can find a link to my Instagram from there, and also my LinkedIn. And to finish us off with a poem, I'll read a short piece. This is called View. This is related to military life and a number of different things we spoke about today. And it was originally published in Straight Jackets magazine. And it's basically, if in terms of voice, I am addressing my husband here.
Oh, awesome. That's kind of perfect. That's fun.
At the memorial, you asked me to read the plaques. The Philippines, Malaysia, Burma, Korea, and Guam. We stood at the top of the cliff where, during the battle, Okinawans had been forced to jump to their deaths. The unwavering gunmetal sheet of sky split open into unabated currents, soaking the earth until water lay above, a current surging over the pathstones, a stream gushing into the sea. In tombs' ashes, the ghosts are still caught between living and dead, reignited in each landmine that is exhumed from the strata of parking lots. And 70 years later, we are standing where our grandfathers had been. We were at the memorial in Okinawa for the Battle of Okinawa, and we chat a grandfather in the Pacific Theater.
That is beautiful.
Outstanding. Great job. Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate you. Like I said earlier, it's not an easy thing to talk about, or sometimes some of our past experiences or things that we've gone through or things that we've been taught to like suppress and things like that. So it is hard, but I think it's important. And we talked about this earlier. It's just so important. We don't know who's watching. We don't know who's listening. Someone could just be tuning in and, it was meant for them to see this portion or this little segment, because it could help them through their journey, through their path. And I'm a huge believer. I really don't want to see people go through what I've gone through. Right. I don't want to see my kids go through what I've gone through. Right. So the only way that I can do that is try to educate them and tell them, when there's something wrong or this or that, but to identify those things. But if no one's saying or anything or identifying anything, we don't know what's out there. Right. So The more that we have people that are pointing things out, exposing things, opening it up, letting others see, it's going to help someone out there. It's going to help someone through their journey, through their path, maybe have a little bit more clarification, not go through so many years of strain. You know, a lot of us have done it, you know, myself. But I really do. Thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
This has been wonderful having you on here. Thank you for, you know, I said it before, thank you for being willing to be so vulnerable, and willing to just open up your heart to us. It's been amazing to kind of see the different perspectives. We have the childhood disability and extensive chronic disability. We have the child of a veteran, Vietnam veteran, who didn't address, you know, a lot of his stuff, you know, and just kind of went into survival mode. You know, we have the experience of, you know, you getting into that creativity and finding your voice. We have the experience of you being a spouse and dealing with what that's like. There's hell that's put on your shoulders, and people aren't very nice to each other. You know, you have all of this experience and then all of this creative outlet, schooling and parenthood and this, that, and the other. This has been a very beautiful, awe-inspiring story of, you know, resilience. My working definition of resilience is continuing to move forward and reaching out for help. And you are doing that, and you have continued to do that, and giving other people voices as well. So just thank you for sharing your voice and continuing to give other people voices as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Erin.
It was a pleasure. Thank you both. Thank you for the wonderful work you're doing as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. That was I'll just call you Erin. All right, Marie. Well, that was an amazing guest that we had right there. And it was awesome to hear another perspective, right? And not only just her perspective, but the things that she's gone through and had to experience. And, you know, she is a great representation of, you know, people that are just resilient. And she doesn't allow for the things in her life to stop her or prevent her from moving forward. And this is what we try to express is, whatever trauma you go through, try to make it to the other side and become an advocate, you know, an advocate for that trauma. So that way there's someone out there to look for guidance, maybe help them through those challenging times that you're going through. Because we can't really tell what someone's been through if you really haven't put those shoes on and walked through it, right? So it's better to hear it from the people that put these shoes on every day, tie them up and lace them up, and hear how they go through that experience. And then someone else is like, damn, I put my shoe on just like that. You know what I mean? So it's just great. And I love, you know, like I said, we love having everybody on. And that just brings me to, if you have a story out there about some kind of resilience and how you're trying to become an advocate before whatever trauma you've gone through, come on our show. Come share it with everybody. We really think it's very important. You can email Marie at sliderbabe.com. Go to sliderbabe.com as well, and you can go find the calendar for Coffee Talk, and also go check out a lot of her amazing content out there. Also, you can email me every day is a Saturday, 365@yahoo.com. All right. Well, this was an amazing one. We're going to go ahead and get ready to get out of here so Marie can go back to getting some rest. This is her first stint of doing stuff. So how are you doing after all this?
I'm starting to hurt. So I'm ready to call it and get some rest. But this has been worth it. This has been a lot of fun. Yes, there is definitely a white flag raising right now.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And remember how we say, don't let the day kick your ass. Make sure you're out there kicking it. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.